Welcome back to the Awaken podcast. Today we're landing in the space, talking all things mental health, about journeys, adversities, whatever comes up in conversation really. My guest today, someone pretty big in the space. He's definitely an inspiration to a lot of people and has definitely changed the lives of many people along their journeys too, and it's been a really profound experience to getting to know him a little bit over the last month or so. So without further ado, Cooper Chapman, thanks for joining me today, brother.
Mate, thanks for having me. It's great to catch up and get to finally do this. Thanks for rescheduling. I know I pulled out on you like last minute a couple of weeks ago because I had something come up. So I appreciate giving me the time again to catch up.
Mate, no worries. I think going into this space, there's always a lot of people who we cross paths with, and I think it's great to share the time and share the value that we have, especially in the mental health scene. And yeah, no stress about the reschedule, man. It's so good. But firstly, I think we have a lot to unpack, and your resume is super incredible. You've done a lot of things in your life, and you continually do a lot of great things in your life, and I think that's a really great point of conversation today in this episode. But I guess, taking away from the current things you do in your life, how was your childhood and growing up? Walk me through the early stages of Cooper Chapman.
I mean, my childhood was great. I feel very lucky. I grew up in a family household that was very stable. You know, my parents are still together, still living in the beautiful house that I grew up in down in North Narrabeen in Sydney. I've got 3 sisters, 1 older sister, 2 younger sisters. And yeah, I mean, all things considered, we're a very privileged family. We definitely didn't come from any wealth or come from any financial backing, but we were always comfortable. My dad kind of was the only one working sort of growing up, and my mum raised us kids. And yeah, my dad was there after work every single day, taking me surfing, and just sort of a really close family, which was really great. But, you know, there was obviously challenges like all of us face when we're young people. I lost an uncle when I was quite young to suicide, so I was always kind of aware of mental illness. But all things considered, my childhood was pretty good. I mean, I grew up in Sydney, so when I was 6 years old, the Olympics came to town, so that was a really pivotal point in my journey, I guess, becoming a professional athlete myself in surfing and following a lot of sporting pursuits throughout my life. I really think the catalyst for that was having the Olympics in my hometown, like at 6 years old. So yeah, my childhood was pretty positive, if I'm being completely honest.
What do you think was the motivation for you to get into surfing?
Definitely my dad. I mean, from a young age, I grew up a 3-minute drive from the beach, and we spent a lot of the time watching my dad surf when we were kids. And then from about 5 years old, my parents got me into nippers, so that's surf lifesaving down at the beach. And I think a lot of young Australians have that experience as kids growing up. For me, it was all about getting the ocean knowledge and being safe at the beach because, you know, we're going to spend a lot of time there in our life. I think 85% of the population in Australia lives within 50 kilometres of the coastline. So it's a huge part of all of our life. So for me, the beach was just a huge part of my life as a kid. So I'd do nippers where we'd do the flags and run on the sand, and then we'd do the beach sprint, and we'd do the wade and the board paddle and the swimming. And that was just a huge part of my kind of 5 till 8 year old journey. I never really jumped on a surfboard and was like a surfer at 5 years old or 3 years old like you see a lot of kids nowadays. But I'd always see my dad doing it, and then it got to the point where I was like 7 or 8, I think, and we'd go on a family holiday either down the south coast of New South Wales or up to Foster on the mid-coast, and my dad would start pushing me into some waves on his surfboard. And, you know, I picked up a joy for it from quite a young age, and I also picked up, I guess, a bit of talent in it from a pretty young age. As I said, I had this sort of spark of competitiveness and being an athlete from that Olympics experience at 6 years old. So once I, started surfing, I began to pick it up quite quickly and had that ocean knowledge from doing nippers from 5 or 6, and that's where it all really began for me. I also played rugby union kind of competitively as a junior. I got up to like under 13s before I retired from rugby union, but I played in sort of the state rep team and really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed being part of a team sport, but it got to the stage where I was like, do I want to go surfing for training, or do I want to go and like get tackled by blokes for training? And I wasn't the biggest kid, so the decision was pretty easy to make. I'm going to go jump in the ocean and go surfing. And yeah, that's where things really started from me. From about 9 or 10 years old, I was competing and sponsored, and yeah, my journey was kind of set on that trajectory from about 10 years old.
Do you think the first moment you did get on a surfboard, you're like, okay, this is me? Because I think in my experience, when I sort of enter a sport, especially at a young age, it was that instant spark. It was like you fell in love with it instantly. Did you have that instantly with surfing?
I mean, as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, I don't know if you have that sort of self-awareness to go like, oh my God, this is a thing for me. But I grew up at a beach called North Narrabeen, which is quite iconic globally when it comes to surfing. There's been many world champions from there. There's always been a very strong surfing community there. So I think having sort of mentors and role models that are within reach really allows you to have the awareness that, oh, maybe this could be something. So I guess from like 10, 11, 12 years old, I started to, have a bit of success. You start competing as a junior surfer in what we call the Grom comps from sort of under 12s, under 14s, under 16s. So I was travelling every school holidays up and down the east coast of Australia with my mum and dad and all my sisters, jumping in the big red Tarago van, and would go and do all my surf contests. And yeah, I definitely had the spark and loved the ocean and loved competing, but I think just any time that you start getting sort of the accolades and the external validation of becoming quite elite at something at a young age, you get sort of drawn to it. So yeah, that was sort of my experience and my recollection of that age.
How supportive were your family during this? Did you ever, I guess growing up, I think as children, as adolescents too, we have this idealization of a certain person or a certain career. Was that ever a thing in your journey as a young kid before surfing?
I mean, my parents were always super supportive. My dad obviously loved surfing, so he loved getting to see me compete and loved his rugby, and that's why I played rugby. But there was never any pressure at all, They just loved seeing me having a good time and loved seeing me succeed because, as a parent, I can't imagine there's any better feeling than seeing your kid happy, but also seeing them, strive towards something and achieve goals. So there was never any pressure at all. My family was very big on make sure you got to finish school, as much as you are doing well in your sport and, you are getting some results and doing well. Sport isn't everything, your education's very important too. So as much as throughout my high school years I was travelling the world already representing the country, I still really had a big focus on school. A lot of surfers in my position getting paid to surf before they finish school will leave in year 10 and go pursue it, full time and not do their higher education. Whereas for my parents, where they're like, you know what, it's important for you to finish your school, so we're going to give you the flexibility to travel as well as the school will support you as well to travel and not, suspend you or expel you from too much time off. But my school was very supportive. I went to a sports high school. And yeah, my parents were like, as long as you keep your grades up, as long as you finish school, we don't care if you go to university or not, but we want you to stick this out. You've done 10 years of it. What's another 2 years to, say you got to the end of it? So as much as there was absolute support with my career and my surfing and go and do what you want travel-wise, there was still that kind of backbone of it's important to, follow through what you've started, which was schooling.
Talk me through the feeling of being an elite athlete at such a young age and traveling the world through high school. Did you ever face any, people coming in contact with you with a slight bit of jealousy or resentment for you being in that position?
I don't know if there's jealousy or resentment. To be honest, looking back, I was such a different person than I am now. I think with the external validation and the, success came quite a bit of ego myself, came quite a bit of, cockiness, I guess would be the best way to describe it. I'm sure you ask any of the kids at my school, I'd say I was quite cocky. And I guess I just didn't know how to express myself back then in a way of being kind and, that it really doesn't matter how well you do in a surfing contest. It's, that doesn't tell you the sort of person who you are. That's what you do, but it's not who you are. And I really wasn't exposed to that concept until sort of my early 20s. So yeah, there was challenges, I guess, throughout my teen years that I was unaware of. I guess I was learning some mindsets that were quite unhealthy when it came to, really caring what other people thought of me, really living by this idea of external judgment. And yeah, it was an interesting time, my teen years. I was quite unaware, I guess, of how I was treating myself, was treating other people, but was very lucky to get some good people around me to sort of change that mindset in my early 20s.
Yeah. I can understand that. Being, elite and having an ego that's sort of frowned upon, I feel like. At what age did you think you started to realize that you were living this life of just egotistical behaviors, and then, you had to really make a change to, I guess, humble yourself?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I was very lucky, especially my dad was always in my ear kind of giving me advice that quite often I'd push away because the ego would get in the way. I'd be like, I know better than you, I surf better than you, like, oh, this person's got my best interests. Whereas looking back, there was quite a lot of people, as there is in any sporting industry, that are out there for themselves, that are out there to make them look good, not to make you look good. And my dad was always in my corner, but at times I'd push away that advice. So my dad was super instrumental in that. It sort of always, had my back, always would pull me back into line. But then there was a couple moments that really changed things for me. I guess one of the biggest forms of external validation as a surfer is being sponsored. Pardon me. Is putting stickers on your surfboard, getting the backing from a brand to either financially back you or to give you product to be able to, pursue your dreams. And when I was sort of in my early to mid-20s, I lost my major sponsors, and that's a big hit to the ego when you're kind of living off external validation and ego, and then you have to peel those stickers off your surfboard. It's almost like having to go to the next surf contest naked. That's basically how it feels. And looking back, I'm like, what a stupid thing to think, like no one actually really cares except for you. But at the time, it meant so much to me. So losing that was the first sort of push towards change. But it also came with about 6 months of victim mindset of, oh, am I going to quit? Or if they don't want to support me, then I'm not good enough. So it just came with, a pretty detrimental period of my life where, I soothed with partying and alcohol and all of that stuff that a lot of us get led to try and numb the pain that we're feeling, or the, embarrassment or the shame or the guilt that we're feeling that we didn't, maximize the opportunity we did have while we had that sponsorship, and now I don't. So for a few months, I kind of carried this, mindset that was quite unhealthy. And then I was lucky enough to be invited to surfing's first ever Olympics training camp for surfing in the Olympics back in 2016. It was announced that it was going to be in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. And they picked the top 10 or 12 Australian male surfers to come to this introductory camp to learn the AOC, learn a bit more about the Olympics as a whole. And I was lucky enough just to scrape in as probably like the 10th person who got picked for that camp. So that was this like little spark again of external validation, but kind of in a different way. It's like, okay, they care about me for my surfing, not for the accolades and other things. And at that training camp, I kind of knew I wasn't going to be selected in the Olympics, but I was like, what else can I get out of this camp that could maybe like help me out? I'm living in a pretty detrimental mindset right now. And one of the things at that camp that we got told by this great guy, Ben Crow, who's a mindset guy, he basically said, like, pro surfing's what you do, but it's not who you are. Like, what are your values? And that was the first time that I'd actually really had to stop and think, like, yeah, what are my values? But my psychologist then went on to tell me later that week, who was at Surfing Australia too, like, how well do you live to those values? And that kind of was just this big change up in my mind of like, okay, I don't need to base my self-worth and identity on external validation, on career, on achievements. Maybe I can base it on how well I live to these values on a day-to-day basis. And then the only person who can judge me is me. Everything else is just, white noise. So that sent me on a journey through my 20s to really shift my whole perspective on life of caring what other people think about me to also caring what I think about myself. And my sort of compass for that is how well do you live to your values?
What are your values?
I mean, the 5 that I kind of have landed on through years of kind of research and years of sort of curiosity of other people that I look up to. Responsibility is my first and foremost. Like, we have to take responsibility for our own life. And the 2 stages to that, I believe, are awareness, but then action. Most of us know that we should take responsibility, but aren't actually doing those actions on a day-to-day basis. So, and this is stuff that I struggle with. This is why these values are so important to me, because I have to try and look in the mirror each day and go, wait, did I live to those today? So the first one's responsibility. The second one's gratitude. Gratitude was something that was drilled into me almost every day as a kid. My dad would say to me, appreciation, not expectation, Cooper. And I didn't get what he meant when I was a kid, but now I know he's teaching me like the most valuable lesson in life. Like, focus your thoughts and energy on what you've got rather than what you don't have. And it's not about saying, oh, I don't have any challenges. it's about just shining the light for a few moments each day on the good things. And now I know through the research I've done with different neuroscientists and different people I've worked with and podcasted with, is that when we practice these things, it releases chemicals that make us feel good. And most of us know that gratitude, it's this kind of hippy-dippy thing. But it's like, but if you actually start to practice it, no different to going to the gym and working out, you're going to get stronger. You do gratitude, you're going to start to view the world through a different lens. You're going to strengthen your mind. So gratitude's something I try and practice every day. Empathy is my third value. I think it's so important that we, try and stop and recognise that, we're all just trying our best to live out this journey of life, and put yourself into other people's shoes, learning to listen a little bit better, and learning not to judge people. Like, so often I feel like we lead with judgment rather than leading with empathy. And I think if the world started with empathy before judgment, we'd be in a very different place. So empathy is a big one for me. Mindfulness is my fourth one. I think mindfulness is such an important trait to have, which is just being present. I feel like so many of us are just living up in our mind, either reminiscing on the past or being worried about the future. For me, mindfulness is a practice that, can be done every single day, and it's also a value to live by, how present you can actually be when you live, or life's just going to pass us by. And the last value that I try and live by is kindness, for a few reasons. Obviously, it's good to be kind because, then people like being around you. But I've also learned, once again, the neuroscience behind kindness. When we're kind to ourselves, when we're kind to others, when we're kind to the environment, it releases chemicals that make us feel good. So if we can use that as a tool, next time you pay for petrol, look at the person in the eyes, smile, say, thanks so much, I hope you have a great day, and mean it, it'll make you feel good as much as it makes them feel good too. So I think if we, recognise that kindness can be a tool in our life and use it as a value that not only is going to make other people feel good in the world, but it should make you feel good too. So they're my 5 values that I really talk about a lot in my work and try and live by. There's obviously other values that I try and live by, like integrity and respect and honesty. But I think those 5 are just really tangible baseline ones for me. If I'm doing all of those, it kind of really looks after my well-being and my overall life.
Do you think, your values of gratitude and kindness, do you think connecting the dots back to your teen years, do you reckon you had lost sight of those 2 values and that's why that was a byproduct of your ego?
Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely almost the opposite, as a lot of us do when we grow up, with the stuff that our parents tell us, we want to kind of do the exact opposite. And, my dad, as I said, would always say appreciation, not expectation. And he would relate it a lot to my surfing, because I'd be like, I'm getting less from this sponsor than this other guy who I surf better than, who I'm getting better results than. But then he would say to me, like, appreciation, not expectation, mate. Like, you don't deserve or expect anything. Just appreciate that you're getting something. There's a lot of people who are getting a lot less than you. And yeah, definitely through my teen years, I think it took a lot of maturity to actually realize that we can anchor our well-being around these values rather than the external validation, the external expectation that people deserve to give us stuff. Like, it's so funny as athletes, we go through our career where everyone around us is trying to help us achieve our dreams. Like, we're so lucky as athletes, we've got our physio, we've got our sponsors for our surfboards, we've got our sponsor for our clothes, we've got our coach in the gym, our surf coach. Everyone's trying to help us achieve our dreams. But then you finish your career and it's kind of like, wait a second, I'm back into the big wide world where no one's really trying to help me achieve my dreams. So I think you get a bit of a warped mindset as an athlete as to what reality really is. And I definitely had that, and I've been lucky, as I said, to have some mentors, some psychologists, some parents and friends around me who have pulled me back into line to try and move from that sort of cocky, egotistical younger Cooper to a good human, to be a person who, lives by strong values.
I think as athletes too, I think we can ride this super upstream, ride of, all these joys and emotions of, having success, having sponsors and stuff. But then in the face of the mirror, we can also have completely lost ourselves in that process. Do you think there was ever a moment in your surfing career or your professional athleticism career where you had completely lost yourself in all shape or form?
I mean, I wouldn't say in all shape or form, but there's definitely some very unhealthy behaviours along the whole journey, whether it be with, partying and doing all that stuff in between events and, not giving myself the best opportunity for success. But yeah, I just think as athletes, we're so lucky, but sometimes we forget how lucky we really are. I travelled the world surfing with my friends for 10, 15 years. And I know there's a lot of people who would have had the career that I had that look back and went, I never quite made it to the top 30 in the world, which is kind of all surfers' goal. I never quite cracked that. And for a long time, I'd look back and go, oh, I never made it, like I'm a failure. But I'm like, it's just a choice, the image that I've created in my own head of what my career is. So I think, you know, when we can just be grateful throughout our whole career and just be like, wow, this is amazing. I'm getting to travel. I'm getting to spend time with people who are also chasing greatness and get to, you know, live a life on my terms is like so lucky as athletes. But I just feel like a lot of us miss that.
What would you say the highlight of your surfing career was?
Highlight. I mean, as a whole, I think just traveling the world for 15 years is like such a highlight that I got to do that. And I quite often remind myself nowadays, like traveling's such a privilege. And back then I just, you know, had it as an expectation rather than appreciation for it. Like I used to lose in a surf comp in Brazil and I'd call my travel agent and ask her to change my flight to fly home 2 days earlier, which would cost me money. And I'd forfeit 2 days accommodation just so I could come home 2 days earlier. And I get at times like, getting home 2 days earlier to get more time with your friends and family is important. But now that I'm retired, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'd spend money to try and come home earlier and forfeit accommodation, like enjoy those places. So, you know, the highlight I think was just the people that I met. You know, I've got a community of friends all around the world, in every corner of the world. My network is just insane because of my career, getting to travel and getting to meet people. I mean, obviously there's highlights when it comes to results and whatnot, but I think the things that I remember the most looking back on my surfing career will be the people and the places.
What do you think, how come you made the decision to retire?
I mean, I was kind of getting to the prime age, I guess, of surfing. I was sort of getting towards my late 20s, but there just wasn't that much financial support out there at the time. And I was struggling with that. I was working full times from about 24 until 28, my last 4 years of my surfing career. I was working as a tradie, kind of 40 to 50 hours a week for 6 months a year in between the events to then fund that money to go and travel and compete, which was great. But I just wasn't competitive against the top guys who were surfing and sponsored and getting paid full time to surf. When you're like spending 40 hours digging holes rather than 40 hours surfing and training and, you know, working on stuff, you kind of slip away from the pack pretty quickly. So that was one part of it. That's obviously just an excuse because there's people who do that who still make it. But that was one part of it. But then for me as well, there's two other things. One, I'd started to do a lot of this self-development work on understanding my values better. And I read this book, I can't remember which book it was in. I always say it's The Mountain Is You, but I don't think it was from this. It was just this concept basically that I was exposed to where in life we kind of climb these two mountains. The first mountain is kind of for self-achievement, like which I look at as my surf career. You climb this mountain trying to get the best in the world at something and you get close to the top of the mountain and you look around and you're like, wait, no one's that happy up here. And then you look over to this other mountain that is a mountain of service, that is a mountain of giving back to others, it is a mountain of contributing to the world in a positive way. And that mountain's almost never ending, but that's where all the people who are fulfilled are. And I was like, okay. And I kind of was exposed to that throughout towards the end of my career. And I was like, is this really everything? You know, just trying to win surf contests and surf really good, which is so amazing. And it brings so much joy to some people watching surfing and being involved in that space. But for me, I just felt like I was destined for something different. And I just started the Good Human Factory because my little sister had lost friends to suicide. And I was like, you know what, maybe through, you know, the part of my story that I've kind of been explaining, this idea of understanding your identity and your values better and these different skills and habits that I'd learnt that were backed in science that I never got taught at school. I was like, maybe I can teach some kids that at school. So I'd started the Good Human Factory and it was just starting to give me so much more fulfillment than, you know, going out and trying to win a heat on a surfboard. And that was kind of where things started to transition for me. I kind of slowly built the Good Human Factory while I was still working as a tradie and surfing. So everything was just not getting much of my attention. But then COVID hit and that allowed me to sort of really lean more into the Good Human Factory and surfing started to slip away. And then, yeah, by the end of 2021, it was kind of like, okay, this stuff's more important to me. It's making more impact. It's setting me up better in life financially. Let's lean into this.
What do you think, what was the, you and I have spoken about it outside the studio, but for the audience, tell me about the reason why you started Good Human Factory and how that all come about.
Yeah, so as I mentioned right at the start, I lost an uncle when I was 6 to suicide.
How was that for you at such a young age?
I mean, I just wrote this chapter in my book, actually. It's the first chapter of my book, is this, the first day that I saw my dad cry. I'm sure a lot of, men can remember 1 or 2 times, or maybe a couple more times. But for me, I can only remember like probably 2 or 3 times ever in my life seeing my dad cry. And the first time was that time when I was 6 years old. It's one of my earliest core childhood memories. Just seeing him come down the stairs in our rumpus room and sit down next to me, in tears, and just say to me like, "Oh, my brother passed away." And I'd never met him. I wasn't that close with my dad's side of the family, especially at a young age, but just with that brother, he had a pretty broken up family. And he said to me like, "Oh, like I wish you got to meet him, and I wish I got to spend more time with him." And at the time, he didn't tell me it was suicide. But then, as I got a bit older and started to ask more questions, he sort of let me know and explained that. And as a kid, I just couldn't understand, like, how could you be so unhappy that, you do something like that? And then as I got older, I started to understand mental health a lot better. I watched my dad throughout my teen years go through a few challenges himself. Nothing super intense, but just a bit of depression, anxiety, would sort of, not be in a good spot every now and then. But my mum would kind of, like, best mum ever, but she would every now and then sort of bring up like, "Oh, like, get over it, you're the man." So I built this sort of underlying feeling of like, well, I better not share and say that I'm struggling because I'm just going to get told to get over it. And like, not at all, it was that a conscious feeling, but now looking back, that's just sort of connecting the dots. And because of that, I was always, I guess, maybe protected myself with ego and cockiness of everything's all good. But then also was kind of curious, what can I put in place that if I do get to a point of challenge, I'm, more equipped. So I did read quite a lot throughout my sort of early 20s. Once I got asked, what are your values? It sent me on this journey to try and understand different things that we can do for our mental health that maybe we don't get taught at school, and realize there's an abundance of it. And yeah, I'd started doing it for myself because, I was like, I want to live a different life through my 20s. I want to understand myself better. I want to live by values. And then, as I just mentioned briefly before, my little sister came home from school one day and let us know that she'd lost a friend to suicide. And that was when I was like, you know what, like, kids year 12 at school are struggling so much with their mental health, they're doing the unthinkable. So I pretty much made it my mission from that day. Maybe I can go and share my story with a few kids at my old local high school, and they might learn from 1 or 2 of the things, because I know that I learnt these from a few key people and it really helped me. So maybe I can be that key person for a few kids at schools. And yeah, that was back in 2019, and now I do it full time. I've spoken to about 40,000 students at over 100 schools around the country, and work with big corporate companies now, and just really try and shift this paradigm of mental health and make people realise that just because you don't have a mental illness doesn't mean you shouldn't work on your mental health. It's something we all have, and it's something we should all be working on every single day.
Yeah, that's profound. What do you think is, in terms of the suicide rates, why do you think they are at an all-time high currently?
I mean, there's obviously plenty of contributing factors as to why mental health is being challenged. Obviously, we can point the finger at social media and a connected society, but I mean, I think a big thing is comparison. I think up until 20 years ago, up until 15 years ago, really 10 years ago, social media, we would compare ourselves to just the kids at our school. Now we compare ourselves to every single human in the world. We went from comparing ourselves to like 300 or 400 people to 8 billion people. So it's like, I think our human brains are just trying to, reconfigure what it is to be human in this world where we can see everything. And with that obviously comes bullying with social media, with online stuff, like, it's just so sad to see. But I think one of the main reasons is we're just not taught how to emotionally regulate. I think the education system is really missing the mark with teaching kids how to, take better care of themselves when it comes to their mental health. And, quite often I get the pushback when I say that, oh, that's what parents are there to teach kids. Most of our parents never got taught it either. Our parents are doing the best they can do. And, quite often it's just, I just think there's such a disconnect between the education system and setting kids up for, a future of happiness and peace in their life. We're setting them up for a, future of working and contributing to society.
Yeah, I think there's one thing you said there, comparison. I think we can all fall victim to it all too often, right? I know definitely I used to compare myself so much to so many people around me, whether they're doing better than me. To be honest, man, even if they had more followers, like that's like the way I was headed into it. And it's such a dark place, and it can take a hold of you, until I was exposed to this, I guess, this shift in mindset around comparing myself. And it's like, if you want to compare yourself to the person around you, compare yourself to who you used to be. Compare yourself to the person who you used to be 5 years ago, 12 months ago, 6 months ago, even 3 months ago. And I think that was a very key thing in my journey. It's like, I have come such a long way from where I used to be, and for that I'm so grateful. And before I learnt that, I was constantly comparing myself to this or that and to this person, in so many different ways. And I think to combat that, that lesson has really, shifted me. And I guess through the work you do and the workshops that you do, I saw yours the other week, which is fucking incredible. Such a good time. What do you think, in your experience, what has been the biggest shift you have noticed from the work you do?
I think just trying to give people a different perspective of mental health. I feel like the whole space is really pictured around kind of mental illness. How do we help people who are really struggling? Here's the numbers to call. Here's how you can help your mates, get them to open up more, which I think is so important. But I think if we're taking better care of ourselves on a day-to-day basis, that means we have to have less of those conversations where people are really struggling. And I just think we're really jumping to the point of like, let's help people when they're really struggling. So yeah, what I feel like my work and through the feedback I've had has really done is give people sort of some very simple little daily actions that can help them with their mental health, and give them a different view of like, hey, mental health isn't this destination. Like, we can't just sprint to the end of the treadmill and be like, all right, I've got great mental health. No, good mental health is a journey. It's every single day. What are you doing to maintain good mental health? And we all fluctuate. Like, I mean, I told you before we jumped on air, like I'm in a bit of a, weird spot right now today. Like, we had to put our family dog down yesterday. I've, got a very hectic end of the year schedule. I've got my partner flying in from overseas. We've got some financial things that we're trying to deal with. Like, there's heaps going on in my life right now. So I feel like, that treadmill sped up a bit, which for me is that indication, okay, I need to do a few extra things to walk against that treadmill at the moment. I need to make sure I meditated this morning. I need to make sure that I eat some healthy food today. I go to the recovery centre. Just do those little things that I know are going to help me take a few steps back up to a place of, feeling good. And it's so hard because we get in places where we just feel, like we can't do anything. We just feel paralysed by the anxiety, by the depression that a lot of us get gripped by. But the way that hopefully I try and teach people is to, okay, what can we do that's just one step today? And then eventually incremental steps turns into exponential growth. And I just feel like a lot of us aren't taking enough steps. So I just try and give people a simple way to take a couple extra steps every day.
What do you think, since you've started the Good Human Factory, what has been the biggest challenge you have faced in your personal life and in the face of the Good Human Factory?
I mean, the biggest challenge, I guess, with starting any business is, like, it takes time. I feel like so often, and we'll go back to that comparison piece, we see other people that are killing it in this space, or killing it however you want to look at it, who are growing and have big social following and have big impact, and we want to have that. And this is something that has helped me so much. And it took me until, like, about a year or two into the business to adopt this mindset. But for so long, I was like, I wanted to be all the way here, but I wasn't even ready. Like, I want to get this huge guest on my podcast, but I wasn't even that good at speaking in the first, 50, 100 episodes. So we want to, like, get to step 10 before we're even ready to get there. And then I adopted this mindset where I was like, well, so it took me 18 years to get to the top 100 surfers in the world. If I want to get to the top 100 presenters, mental health educators, podcasters, merch person in the world, I have to expect it's going to take me at least 18 years to get there. And I don't think enough people adopt that mindset. And obviously we can get there far quicker, and I shouldn't have said at least. But because of that, I adopted this mindset that, hey, for this first 4 or 5 years of the Good Human Factory, I'm going to treat it like I'm at university, or I'm going to treat it like I'm getting my trade. Like, I'm going to be an apprentice for 4 or 5 years right now, really learning everything and making mistakes before I give myself any sort of judgment of like, oh, you're an idiot, why'd you do that, why'd you do that? It's like, oh no, that's one way not to do it, that's one way not to do it. Oh, now it's grown in 5 years to a place where, I can support myself just not really well yet, but I'm on my way to, you know, building a business that can support me financially, can grow, to have me, extra people working with me. So I think one of the biggest challenges was to get to that mindset of like, I don't need to be at step 10 on day one. Like, it takes time to grow. So that's one big thing. And then, I mean, so that was, I guess, biggest challenge, but I think biggest win is, I mean, I can point back to the impact and the feedback that I've had from the workshops, from the podcast, from the 1% Instagram community, giving 1% of their day to their mental health. Like, I've built a lot of different sort of domains in the business that all have their impact. So I think just the impact, like every day I get a message from someone saying that it really helped them. So to understand that it's actually having an impact is, pretty special. And I'll read you one, actually. I got sent this last night. I did a workshop yesterday in Engadine High School, which is a high school down in, where is it? Down in Sydney. And to get messages like this is the stuff that's so awesome to me. Where is it? Just like a young boy in the school. Like, when would you ever send this to a presenter after a school? He goes, "Hey, Cooper, thanks heaps for the inspirational talk today. Everyone walked out of it and said it was the best mental health talk they've ever sat through." And then I was like, "Oh, thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. What was your biggest takeaway?" And he said, "Thanks for the reply. My biggest takeaway from the talk that is when you were down in the dumps, that there are others like the Hawaii coach story you showed us and the ways to overcome challenges of losing. Love the talk and hope to see you out in the water and keep doing what you're doing because you're an inspiration to younger generations and their mental health." And the other thing around constructive criticism for mental well-being talk is that I and other mates were talking about you and how being an athlete was very inspiring and they could connect to your beliefs and challenges more easy. So it's like getting messages like that, knowing that it cuts through, because I know at school workshops, you know, we kind of just sit through them and like, oh, here we go, roll our eyes. But to get messages like that after every single workshop is like, I feel very proud that I've kind of found, you know, my way of communicating that's actually connecting with people.
Yeah, man, I absolutely can completely relate. The 2 workshops I did for TAFE Queensland, you know, that was my first ever workshops, my first ever public speaking talks, and I walk into the auditorium and there's about 60 kids sitting up the seats. I'm just like, fuck, I'm about to do this. You know, I had my whole presentation ready and I just rattled it all off and just got talking, and it was weird. I found myself getting into, it was almost like autopilot. I just spoke by default. And, you know, there was a few times, especially when I was talking about, you know, my experiences with my mental health downfalls and, you know, my suicide ideations and, you know, even attempts. There was a time where, you know, there wasn't many dry eyes in the room. And I think to be able to stand there and to have to, you know that their impact is impacting, it was incredible. And, you know, I walked away from that so fulfilled. And even the message I got afterwards, I had a handful of messages, you know, some I had to, you know, pages long. And, you know, just to sit there and to read someone, you know, openly expressing just how much they appreciate the time you talk or even the words you spoke. And, you know, they can channel that into their own life because they've, you know, the workshop I was doing was for, you know, 16-year-olds, grade 11 and 12, and they're sort of on a different path to, I guess, your normal school, normal school children. And so I think it related with them a lot better than what it would if I went to a normal high school, so to speak. Because, you know, there was a period of my life, especially going through that age, where I was, you know, running amok. I was, you know, being a bit of a criminal. I was, you know, doing all these, you know, unhealthy habits and, you know, these behaviors. So I feel like my story could really translate with them a lot better. And to have messages come through, you know, like the one you got, like people, you know, they open your heart up to you. And I think it's one of the most fulfilling things. And I think for the most part, a lot of people, we don't allow ourselves to put ourselves into positions to be fulfilled by the fear of judgment and the fear of failure. You know, I was walking into that like shitting myself. So nervous, man. And, you know, I was just, if I just listened to that and if I stopped at that, I would have suffocated myself with such a fulfilling experience, what really lit me up. And I think the public speaking game, it's so rewarding. And I think just the, you know, the 3 workshops I've hosted, they've really shown me just how fulfilled you can be from doing something you absolutely love. But I think a lot of people hold themselves back from experiencing that because of the fear of failure and fear of judgment. So I guess on the back end of that, what's your, I guess, perception on, you know, the fear of failure and people not allowing themselves to, you know, transcend through their own personal journeys?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, by the way. It's so cool to see you getting into the space and getting up there. And it is wild how many people are so scared of it. And I think I've had absolutely the fear of, like, I wouldn't say the fear of failure, but like the fear of, like, I guess it is failure, stuffing up on stage. But the way that I kind of have dealt with it myself is setting the yardstick very low, basically. And in a way that it's not like about like just aiming low, it's about, okay, what is a successful workshop right now? If I'm speaking to 100 students, if one of those kids walks away learning one thing that's going to make their life 1% better, then I've done my job. Like, how beautiful is that you can make somebody's life a little bit better? So my goal when I walk into a room like that is just to have, okay, I just have to help one person. And then as well with the like stuffing up and like, oh, what if my stuff doesn't matter? It's like, I'm just getting up there to try and help people. If like they want to laugh at it and think, oh, this isn't for me, all good. But for the one person in each session that might get a lot out of it, then that's kind of has helped me a lot with that. But now I see through my feedback and data that it's more like 90% get something out of it. So it's great to know that as you get better, you know, those numbers are going to grow as well. But I think if your heart's in it for the right place and you're getting up there to try and make a positive impact on people's life, like, who cares if you stuff up? The biggest thing that I have taken into all my like presenting and workshops that I've run is this just simple little quote, like, the act of confidence comes before the feeling of confidence. And I think I told you that when we caught up for a coffee a couple of weeks ago. Like, it's just been the biggest help for me, because it's like we're all waiting for that feeling to come to then get up there and do this thing. But quite often you have to do the act for then the body to be like, oh, actually, this isn't that bad. So, yeah, for me, it's just like, you know what? I'm just getting up there to try my best to help people. I'm sharing my story. And, you know, if I get something wrong, then who cares? I gave it a go. Then that's kind of my mindset.
And I think a lot of our growth comes from, you know, stepping outside of our comfort zone. You know, like I said, I could have stopped at the fear of, you know, fucking up, or even just like the nerves taking a hold of me. I think we all experience it so much, and that's why a lot of people, they don't go through with their dreams and goals and ambitions, and they stop the pursuit, right? And I guess, you know, coming into your personal development and especially your workshops, how was that first workshop for you in terms of, you know, how you were feeling, and the feeling post? Because I know for me it was life changing.
Oh, I gotta try and like really bring myself back to the feeling, but it's funny. I have a printout of my first ever presentation that was on like PowerPoint back in like 2019 or 2020. And it was so bad. Like, if you're a year 6 kid trying to put in an assignment, that was kind of what it looked like. Like, it's so funny looking at it now. And not that my presentation is anything fancy now, but it's a little bit better. But my fear back then was, I think my first one was just like a group of like 30 students at my old high school. And I kind of just shared bits and pieces of my journey, as I said, with like a clip art PowerPoint presentation that was so bad. But looking back at it, a lot of the themes are still quite similar to what I speak about now. But I realize like public speaking is about storytelling. It's about making people feel like they're in your story, or they can relate to part of your story. It's not about getting up and just sharing all this really important information. It's like, how do you tell stories so people can connect with that information and actually remember it? Well, anyway, that's how I like to do my presenting anyway. But yeah, from memory, like the first one, I can't remember like getting off the stage, but I just, it's a nice feeling when you finish. I remember at the start, because you're like, oh my God, I'm kind of glad that's over. You kind of have this built up, I wonder if I'm going to say the right thing. Okay, have I remembered everything? Whereas now I do the same presentation basically every time. So I can literally just like go in, plug my computer in, bang it out of the park without even putting any sort of preparation in. So a lot happens once you prepare and do it a lot more. But yeah, the first one definitely was scary.
What do you think, I guess, you know, coming from into your own personal journey in your own life, by doing the work you're doing now, you know, you're expending so much energy to help other people, and in return, I guess you have so much fulfillment, because I know I do as well. What would be, I guess, the greatest, you know, bit of change you have, you know, recognized within your own self and your own behaviors since starting the whole Good Human Factory?
I think the biggest one is just being at peace. You know, I feel like these values really lead me to living a life that's a little bit more peaceful. And what I mean by peaceful is like less judgmental, like, and less getting caught up on what someone did to you because of this or what someone did. Like, I just feel like I've just got complete empathy. I'm just like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to let things like carry with me anymore. I'm just going to focus on how I sort of show up each day for myself. And yeah, that kind of works for me. But I just feel like the biggest thing, is just being able to let go of like things that used to trigger me, used to carry on for a long time. I'm like, what's the point? Like, I've just created all these scenarios in my head. Like, our self-beliefs just come from our upbringing, and, you know, things that we've seen, they can also be unlearnt. And, you know, what's right for me might not be right for somebody else, and I don't have to judge for them for that. It's like, yeah, the work that I've done now has just allowed me to see so many perspectives through my podcast, interviewing, you know, over 200 people now, just to see how different we all are, and just be like, there's no right or wrong of anything. Just try your best to live a life with a smile on your face and at peace. And yeah, we have a bit more control over that than a lot of people recognise, I think.
Now, before the show, you were telling me about a book you're going to be writing. Talk to me about that and what sort of inspired that.
Yeah, so I got approached by a publishing company towards the middle of middle of this year, actually. Far out, it was only a couple of months ago. And they just said to me, like, have you got any ideas for a book? Like, we've been following your journey with the Good Human Factory and everything, and we want to move into a bit more self-development books. And have you got an idea? And I was like, well, yeah, I kind of want to, through my story with values, tell like kind of that, but then I also want to pull together all of the best different healthy habits that I've learnt through my podcast guests, the different experts in wellbeing and neuroscience and all other topics. I want to pull together sort of 10 healthy habits from all those guests, the science behind it, my experience with it, and turn it into a book. But then the concept of the book is this. I came up with this idea like 4 years ago now, that we should give 1% of our day to our mental health. 1% of a 24-hour day is 14 minutes and 24 seconds, or let's call it 14 minutes, is less than 1% of your day. So I was like, well, we should all do 14 minutes for our mental health. What should we do? I have this community on Instagram called the 1% Good Club that does 10-minute meditation in the morning, 4 minutes of gratitude at night. So that's 1% of your day for your mental health. But then the publisher was like, oh yeah, we like the idea. And then they're like, why don't we call the book the 1% Good Club? And then anyone who reads the book learns all these different habits, learns these perspectives and mindsets that are good for their mental health. And then at the end of the book, you kind of make a pledge that you're going to try and do 1% of your day for your mental health. So yeah, I pitched that to them. They were like, we'll take it to the full sales team to get the thumbs up if we want to do the book. And then they came back like the next day and were like, yeah, we love this concept. We think it's really strong for you to tell your story, but then also have all these different healthy habits that are good for your mental health, things like breath work, meditation, getting in nature, exercise, grounding, stretching, communication and connection with a person in your life each day. Like all of these things that most of us know, but I'm going to try and sort of marry together the science, the storytelling, and then actual techniques that people can marry into their life quite easily, with the guys that at the end they feel like, okay, I can do 14 minutes a day now for my mental health. I might miss days, but I'll try and come back most days and do a little bit each day for my mental health. So it's kind of like a concept book. But yeah, I've got a lot of writing to do.
Mate, I'm bloody excited to hear it. Now, what do you think is, your life is ever so exciting and there's a lot of things going on. What is your, I guess, next year looking like for people to follow on to?
Yeah, next year's going to be massive for me. I've got to write this 60,000 word book by March. So the first couple months of the year, there's going to be quite a lot of alone time trying to get writing. Also, I have a program that I partner with Surface for Climate with the Good Human Factory called Blue Minds, where we do education at schools around taking care of our ocean, but then also taking care of our mental health, because there's recent surveys that have showed 67% of young people have eco-anxiety, concerns about the future when it comes to the environment. So a friend of mine, Cal Glansnick, who's a recently elected politician for Cronulla, actually, he's only 24, he's really big on the environment. He and I have both partnered for this program, so we're delivering 20,000 student workshops for next year with that. So that's going to take up a big part of my year, but also just continuing with the wellbeing workshops and corporate workshops that I run under the Good Human Factory, about to add a whole new half-day and full-day session around the 1% idea of giving people sort of what's in the book, but into a full-day workshop for corporate groups and high schools, which will be really exciting. And then, just sort of everything slowly moving forward, trying to keep the podcast moving, trying to continually interview interesting people, trying to bring out new merch that people enjoy wearing and can start conversations. And, yeah, trying to build a relationship, to be honest. My partner's moving to Australia permanently from like 2 days from now. So looking forward to having her back and trying to set up my life and my family.
Love that, man. That's fucking exciting, and I'm bloody so psyched to be along for the ride. I guess to keep the theme of your, you know, your gratitude, you know, practices, what's the greatest thing you are grateful for in your life right now?
I'd say my family. As I touched on at the start, I'm very privileged, and I really see that now that I'm at the age I'm at, that I've spoken to so many people, you know, like my parents are still together. My sisters are all, you know, successful in their own way. And, you know, we haven't really had any really, really big, you know, family apart from grandparents, you know, people who are kind of expected to pass away when they're older, but we haven't really had too much tragedy. We haven't had too many big illnesses or injuries in our family. And I think a lot of us take that for granted. So that's something I'm super grateful for, that, you know, my family's healthy, especially my immediate family. And, you know, I've got a beautiful community of people around me. So that's the thing I'm most grateful for.
Love that, man. Now, at the end of all my episodes, I usually have 3 questions. The first one being, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
The worst piece of advice I ever received. I got told once when I was, this is a funny story. I'm trying to work out whether I write it in my book or not. So when I was like 17 or 18 years old, one of my team managers for my sponsor at the time, we went out to a dinner with a bunch of like the CEOs and bigwigs of the thing. I'm just a young grom. And I remember like telling some sort of story, and I kind of got lost in the middle of it and just went, oh my God, I completely lost where I'm at, and just stopped telling the story. And then the team manager of mine on the drive home, because I'm sort of representing him, he's brought me on the team. He said to me like, oh, you're pretty shit at storytelling, and I don't reckon you should tell stories. So that was like the worst advice I ever got, because now I tell stories for a living. So that was probably some of the worst advice I got.
What would be the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received. Oh, there's so many things. I think probably the best bit of advice I received really comes back to what my psychologist said to me, of like, pro surfing's what you do, but it's not who you are. And like, what are your values, and go find them. So that was probably the best advice I received. It really changed my perspective on all life.
Yeah, that's been something I sort of battle with, not really battle with, but with triathlon, I think for the most part, definitely in the past, I have absolutely tied my identity to that. And, you know, I had an injury start of the year, 4-month injury. I was just like, who am I? Like, I'd completely lost myself. And yeah, I think a lot of us, especially in athletic careers in high achieving sports, we can tie ourselves to that whole, you know, industry and into the outcome as well. You know, if you have a shit surf, what do you do? You're going to beat yourself up, turn to partying, whatever it is. If I have a shit race, I'm going to beat myself up. And yeah, it's like, it's not who we are. It's just a part of us, I think, for the most part. Yeah, that's been something that I can definitely relate with and, you know, resonate with. And yeah, I think now I'm slowly detaching myself from the identity as much as I love it, and as much as I'm still going to continue to do it. There's definitely is a part of me where, you know, it just ties myself to that, which is something, you know, I'm working on as a human. And the last question, if you could sit in front of a man who was to tell you that his days weren't worth living, what would you tell him? Or anyone for that fact.
I think about this quite a lot, and this will relate to what you just asked. Just the fact of how many things have miraculously happened for us to be here living right now and having consciousness is like enough of a gift to be like, you know what, I'm just going to try and enjoy myself on this planet. Like, the amount of things that have had to happen in perfect order for us to be living at this moment in time on Earth is so like astronomical that just like deep-seated like puts gratitude into my life every day. Like, we've got this opportunity to float on this rock through space and connect with people and come up with ideas in our head. Like, we're so lucky. And obviously there's some people that just feel like they're in such a dark, deep place that they don't want to be here living this experience anymore. But yeah, I just urge people to try and find the few little things that are going well in your life. Try and look around and see, you know, if you've got breath in your lungs, there's a lot more than some people. If you've got, you know, a little bit of food on the table, it's a lot more than some people. Just trying to just have, a grateful mindset, which doesn't necessarily take away from your challenges, but also allows you to be like, wow, we're so lucky to be living this existence that is life.
Yeah, I absolutely could not agree more, man. Dude, thank you so much for popping on today. It was it's an absolute pleasure to share this space with you.
No, thanks so much for having a chat. I appreciate it.
Of course, mate. I'm sure you'll be on for another round in a few short months. But dude, yeah, I'll have all your socials in the show notes and get everyone to show you support.
Mate, I appreciate it, man. I'm super proud of what you're doing too. It's cool to see people making changes in their life to try and contribute in a positive way to other people's lives. And it takes a big man to make the changes that I know you've made along your journey. So it's really cool to see what you're doing as well. And any way I can support along the journey, always here.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Now, to everyone else, thank you so much for joining us today. An absolute blissful episode. And absolutely stoked to be able to come in here and share the space with not only Cooper, but for you guys as well. Just remember, you guys are worth it more than you can ever fucking comprehend. And, your place on this earth is just more than a reason for you to stay here. So, once again, thank you so much for joining me for another episode. And I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.